Welcome back to the Mental Dietitian Podcast. I'm your host, Ahren Lynch-Potter, and today's guest I got connected through a very good friend of mine, Kevin, and he said, "You got to talk to Maggie Kirkwood." I was like, "Cool." I was like, "What does she do?" She has a podcast called Minds on Mushrooms. She really started her deep dive into that world about 2.5, 3 years ago. And honestly, most people's life is a deep dive. It doesn't, that's what people say. I started my healing journey. It probably started a long time ago, but that's from our first conversation. She now helps people through microdosing protocols. She has a program called Rethinking Your Drinking. And it's an 8-week transformational microdosing protocol, which has helped a lot of people. And one of her greatest passions from when I first spoke to you, Maggie, which I found really interesting, is you work with women who are in the corporate world who are finding it hard to take what you labeled a chill pill, finding it hard to slow down. And I know that there was probably a season in your life where you were running as fast as you could, running on the treadmill, and thinking that if you run faster, you'll see that light at the end of the tunnel. So, welcome to the show. I'm happy to have you here.
Oh,
Going from my introduction there, like what led you to where you are now? And like obviously you work with mostly women. I know you had a real estate brokerage in the past. What
hmm.
was your life like 5, 10, 15 years ago before you were Maggie Kirkwood as you are right now?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. I just love the continued conversation around anything psychedelics and mental health. So thank you, thank you. Um, let's see here. 10, 15 years ago, I was actually working in the corporate world. I would say right around 13 years ago was my pinnacle, the pinnacle of my corporate career. This was before real estate and before the brokerage that my ex and I had started. But I was doing creative direction. I was a creative director for Best Buy, so it was a pretty big deal. And really just working my ass off, showing up in the office, trying to be earlier than others and staying late and putting everything I had into this amazing career that I had worked really hard to get there. There had been many graphic design agencies and layoffs, and so I was really proud. I was really happy to have this position. But yes, I was working with um, many people who were. It was clear to me they, were year 20, 22 in this same corporate office. And I think the reason I'm bringing that up is that's where I started to take note, I think, of for the first time, I consider myself a little bit of a free spirit. So it's hard for me to imagine myself in one place for any huge significant amount of time. But at that point, that's where I was. I was at Best Buy Corporate, creative directing and working my butt off. And about that time is when I had my daughter, who's now 13. So it was a whole world of, yeah, a lot of work.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you were pursuing this corporate career, which I imagine
Hmm.
demanded a lot of you, but then you have a daughter, which also demands a lot of you. What was that decision like of like, I can imagine, I could be wrong, but like feeling like I worked really hard to get to this place in my career, all the layoffs, all of that kind of stuff. And now I
Hmm.
have this beautiful daughter in my life, and it's a lot of choice. It's a choice that a lot of women have to make, unfortunately. It's just how the world works at the moment, the way it's structured, is they choose their like corporate career or they choose being a mother. Because taking
Yep.
a year off in the corporate world can really kind of throw things back and people get replaced and things like that. What was that like for you?
Well, that was probably one of the most challenging aspects. And not only, so my ex is Australian, like yourself. So comparing to friends overseas who are having children and taking years off, and dads too, and really getting to enjoy that very special once in a lifetime time.
Mm.
So that was a very challenging aspect for me. And I am not a very organized person. And I know that there's people who you can plan and, when they're giving birth and how much time they have to put towards maternity leave. And I just remember feeling extremely stressed. And I had had a high kind of risk pregnancy all through it, by the way. So my blood pressure was high and I was on bed rest, and the whole experience is, it's a lot. But yes, it was almost that like I did not have really a choice or a decision. I took the standard 3 months and I knew I was going to be getting right back to work, which of course was very, very challenging for me. Thankfully, my ex at the time he was in the real estate already. So he was stay-at-home dad, he took care of our baby. So I'm so thankful that he was able to do that. But yeah, that's one thing here in America, which is very um, so true, is finding that time for parents when you do have little ones come into the world. Um, unless you're working in a pretty progressive or newer company, not newer, but you know what I'm saying,
Yeah,
corporate
I
life,
think,
that the
yeah,
standard is you're going to have to get back to work. And yeah, just to kind of keep the ball rolling here, I when I look back and I think about the pressures of being back, realizing I'm missing my baby at home, um, when you're pregnant, you're not consuming alcohol, or hopefully not. But I think it was shortly right after breastfeeding, I had phased that out maybe, six, I think I made it 8 months, if you
yeah,
must know.
yeah,
Just kidding.
yeah,
But anyway, that it's coming home and, I need to relax, but I'm going to do that with that glass of wine, right?
yeah,
So when I start really thinking about my healing journey, you've kind of pinpointed that just now as we speak, because it's thinking about, yeah, that's when I would come home, see my little baby girl, have a few words with the husband, and then it's all about whatever you can do to unwind and enjoy that time.
yeah.
And so that was me turning to wine. Um, but yeah, if I may continue, just then I realized I've got this beautiful baby girl at home. I don't want to really be getting into this office, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. PTO is limited. I had like maxed all mine out with my maternity leave. How am I going to, what's going to change so I can enjoy being a mom? And it was shortly thereafter that the ex and I had the idea to start this real estate brokerage. Which would be a tremendous amount of work, but in turn lead to a more flexible lifestyle where you're not needed in an office for 40 hours a week. So that was the idea there. Um, and the business is a beautiful, still running real estate brokerage business, but unfortunately it ruined my marriage. And again, rather than working or trying to heal, we had a very rough time getting pregnant, multiple miscarriages, a late miscarriage. At
Mm.
23 weeks, we lost a baby boy.
Oh,
In the Midwest here, it's my belief, we acknowledge when things go wrong, and we talk and we give hugs and for 5 to 7 days, but then it's that kind of sweeping under the rug. And it's nobody's fault. And maybe it's not even a Midwestern thing, but I think that here in Minnesota nice, it's hard to have those hard conversations and ask questions when, I'm visibly pregnant and then heading back to work when I had lost my baby and I'm no longer pregnant. What does that conversation look like at the office? How do people? So instead, you just shut it down and turn to what's comfortable and feels good. And for me, that was alcohol.
mm,
Um, and starting this real estate brokerage with my ex, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of brainstorming and alcohol and and it's fun. But um, yeah, unfortunately, our business just consumed. We forgot how to be married,
Yeah.
essentially.
It's not that I imagine you maybe just became business partners instead of being married.
Business partners 100% couldn't have a coffee without work coming about in our conversation. And um, when you're in real estate, as it is, you are, I like to say, someone's bitch. No matter what, you're glued to
Yeah.
your phone. You've got to be accessible to your clients. So that coupled with, yeah, husband and wife trying to work together, just and nobody said it was going to be easy starting a business at all. But I think it's just, again, when I take a look back, I'm often thinking about if plant medicine would have been an option for one of us or both of us, rather than escaping all the time, escaping that hard conversation, escaping this hard question, just really facing what's at hand, facing your truth, facing what comes up and
Yeah.
working through it. So it's a lifetime ago, but I don't regret anything at all. I ponder. I
Mm.
ponder the plant medicine, and obviously I'm very vocal about my belief with it. So it's just an interesting to think about.
Yeah. We all have our own journey. That's why I wanted to go back a bit. And yeah, I can see your kind of processing it like, yeah, could have been different, but it couldn't have been different at the same time. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't have these very powerful, hard lessons that you learned through going through all of that, through the being torn between your daughter and only having 3 months off, and then wanting more freedom, and then starting the brokerage, and then going all into that, which is all consuming. People are going to text you at 12 p.m. at night and be like, hey, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, like you said, you're supposed to be somebody's bitch.
Mhm.
And yeah, what was the pivotal point 2.5, 3 years ago that was like, okay, I don't want to drink anymore? Did it get to a place where it was every day? Did it get to a place where it was like, what was that turning point? Like, I used to be a personal trainer and I would have clients. I'm like, what was the weight you hit on the scale when you were like, oh, like, what was that for you?
Yeah, well, for me, I'm just going to start with, I think growing up, I grew up with an alcoholic father. Um, so I knew from a young age, or the program that was programmed into me was alcohol is terrible, stay away. And I did a really good job. I was a goody two shoes basketball a basketball star in high school. It really wasn't until college that I decided to test the poison. um, and for years, I had a pretty darn healthy relationship with alcohol. I had some of the most exciting and fun times. I traveled all through Australia, lived there for a couple of years. Um, I thought, and when I was in Australia, I remember talking about my dad's alcoholism, and at least the part of town I was in, it was almost like they didn't believe in addiction, or like that couldn't be a thing. But I know different parts of Australia are extremely different. But
Mhm.
I remember kind of like having this conversation with my mother about just that, uh, like how was it? It was my ex's family was kind of like challenging me on the fact that my dad could have been an alcoholic or, wasn't. But anyway, so yeah, some of the most incredible times, experiences for years with alcohol. And then I think I, yeah, I was to a point where I was drinking daily. And so this would, pandemic, I'm going to say, around the pandemic time, I remember thinking, what am I gonna, if there's no booze, how does this work? So I think things really escalated over the pandemic. I think a lot of my anxiety, with everybody in the world was having problems. But for me, that's when I started realizing, yes, I was having wine every day. And I was feeling incredibly trapped in my marriage. Divorce was not a word in my vocabulary. I never thought that that was an option. I thought, I was married for 20 years. So this was year, I can't do math well, but maybe 16 of my marriage, right? So th- that's my I chose to escape those feelings of, oh, I can't be divorced and I have to be married and I have to maintain this brokerage and be a mom and this is how it's going to be for the next 40 years. And so my best friend was wine. And in turn, it doesn't take much, but I wasn't sleeping at all. And I would wake up in a panic and I would cry. And I'm not a religious person. And I would be sitting there pretty much unable to control I'm in a panic, I'm sweating, I'm thinking about, can I have a drink now? I'm praying to my grandparents because I don't, whatever. So that was my deal. I was waking up crying. And then in turn, in the morning, I was looking at my face in the mirror and that was a huge thing. I was just grossed out by how sad I looked and puffy. And I I did not feel well. And I knew that voice in my head, it's not good for you. And just constant dialogue in my head, not necessarily about when can I have my next drink, but just alcohol's terrible. You shouldn't be drinking. If I drink tonight and I have 3 glasses of wine, that's 460 calories. So what am I going to eat? How much is that going to cost? Do I need to take an Uber? I couldn't handle it. It was just top of mind all the time, all these decisions about weekend plans. And so ultimately, I didn't know at the time, but I had made that decision. I'm done. I can't, I'm going to die. I thought I was going to die. I was constantly worried about, I was like checking my pulse because I realized I decided a buddy of mine who had quit drinking, he said, Maggie, write down a list of the pros and cons. And I did. There were no pros. And the only thing at the end of this that I just knew was that alcohol provided me anxiety and depression. That was it. So, also, I want to add, I started doing some research on what, and not an alcoholic brain, but like somebody who drinks a couple times a week, or I started looking at brain scans of like a depressed brain, an alcoholic's brain, and brain health for whatever reason, excuse me, I had never really pondered brain health at
Mm.
all, but that was sticking out like a huge red flag. Like you're killing your brain cells, Maggie, and you're doing it daily. So it was a combination of things. But I had made up that I said, I can't do this anymore, but I had no idea what I was going to do. My dad, he runs AA meetings, and that is not a path I was going to go down. And then going to treatment. Oh, I don't know how that would work. Taking 30 days or whatever, 28, and stepping aside from my daughter and the business. And so I felt more stranded than ever. I felt like I didn't have anyone to talk to. I didn't tell anybody anything. Um, but I knew I had to be done. And then that's when I got a call from another friend who had said he had microdosed and he hadn't been drinking for 30 days. And I said, sign me up. So that's how we get into the plant medicines there. Does that kind of
Oh,
help you out?
beautiful. Absolutely, yeah. Um, I wanted to I wanted to add this as well. Like for anybody who's listening, I'm an addiction recovery coach. I'm a certified addiction recovery coach. And I think we all have small addictions to certain things. Some people have addictions to certain emotional states where they are wanting to be happy all the time. And if they're not happy, then they feel sad. And then if they feel sad, that's bad, according to them.
Mhm.
Um, what I learned about addiction is that I wanted to say this, that when you wrote down pros and cons, there's always pros. There's always benefits every single time. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and the benefit is for most people, and what you said is it was escaping those feelings, those
Mhm.
feelings of like being trapped and being like, what the hell is going on? Like, just so much. I imagine so much energy going to that. Like, just so many like constructing things in your mind to make sure, like around food and calories and sleep and plans with people. And will they have alcohol there? Will they not have alcohol there? I don't want to have too much because I don't want people to think I have a problem. But I still want to be social, but I don't want to stop. Uh,
Yeah.
just so much energy going to that. And yeah, anything we do, there's a benefit. And I've had this with people. One of the hardest lectures we did in the Being True to You course that I did was the title of it was Benefits of Addiction. And people were so triggered in that. There was like 100 people on the
Mm,
Zoom call. I remember this one individual, they just wouldn't stop butting in when we were listening to the lecture. He's like, I just don't agree. There's no benefits. I think he'd
yeah.
battled with addiction. And until you find the benefits of what is causing your suffering, you will not actually transcend it ever.
Yeah. I totally hear you there. I think my pro and con exploration was just something needed
Oh, it
before I
was so needed
even
because the list was probably like this long. You're like, what am I doing? Like, this
but
sucks.
but this is before I understood my addiction and why I was drinking and the trauma behind it, you know.
Yeah.
I was just waking up feeling like shit. Like and then here I am 3 years and it's like yes. I mean, so that is absolutely on point. You know, you have to figure out the core wound essentially. What is
Yeah.
it?
Yeah,
What's that
exactly.
make? Yeah,
How did I get here? Why am I doing this? And when when you did, I'm assuming you started microdosing because of that friends. Tell us about that. Like, what was your first experience with that like?
sure. So throughout my college years, not to date myself, but we're talking about 20 years ago or so, I would party with alcohol and magic mushrooms
Hmm.
and never, that was it. Just a lot of laughing, a lot of drinking. Um, Shortly before this friend of mine told me he had been microdosing to rid alcohol out of his life, I had actually, I was like, still drinking, but dabbling with some chocolate truffles or mushroom, you know, just another party sort of situation. So they were kind of like back in because it had been a couple decades where, you know, um, so when he called me, he's like, Megs, I haven't had a drink in 30 days. At first, I was like, I was mad. He was my drinking buddy. I'm going through divorce. I'm, you know, looking for that, you know, hangout. And then he said, I've just been taking one of those chocolate mushroom truffles every day. And each chocolate truffle is zero point 0.5 grams. This is a couple years ago. So anyway, I just was like, really? Like, it was just such a weird, I had no concept of how psilocybin, and we can get to this. But anyway, I just thought I'm eating chocolate that has some mushrooms in it. I did not make any sense to me. Um, but I said, I'm going to try. So I ordered 10 chocolate truffles and I told myself, I'm going to just commit to taking one of those for 10 days. That's all, that was my only plan. And so and at this point, like I said, I had it in my head. My goal is like, I cannot drink. I feel like I'm dying. I want to be a better mom. I'm not myself. I'm looking at myself in the mirror. I felt like I was outside of my body. I was a sad human. I didn't really know it. I didn't. But anyway, so yeah, I would wake up and who knows, but it was probably around after my coffee, but in the morning, I would have my truffle. And I just remember the first 3 days, I I had I'm really good at quitting when I was drinking, I could take a month off here or a week off, but I would always come back at it like tenfold or,
Hmm.
you know. So I was just assuming these first 3 days without alcohol, they're always the worst. Like it's like boring. Anyway, that was not the case. I felt that with the chocolate truffle, I wasn't thrilled, but I almost just felt this hug or just like this kind of like the taking the pressure off or just something like a little melty, right? And
Yeah.
I, but nothing extraordinary. And I just said, well, this isn't so bad. So then I kept, the first 3 days that were kind of like that. Um, the next couple days, I was looking forward to getting this little truffle down and enjoying it. Like then I was getting outside and I just kind of felt around, I think it was a week into it, where I was feeling or hearing or listening or gathering messages. Maggie, alcohol, you don't need alcohol. You can feel like this. You don't need it. And it was like also telling me how terrible it is for me. So then I started looking at those like brain scans and what a depressed brain looks like and an alcoholic's brain. And then it was shortly after that where, yeah, it was literally like this switch, the alcohol switch in Maggie's head was flipped off.
Hmm.
And I haven't had a sip since, but I
Wow.
have a strong, it's like, and I have to be quiet. I have to like calm myself down because when I don't care if other people drink. I really don't. But for whatever reason, it's like a poison to me. And I'm like, ugh. Or if I would accidentally have a sip of and realize it was alcohol, I would not be happy. I would be so I but I just thought that that was so magical. Like how the heck a week before wine was my only and best friend. And then a week later, after the microdosing, I'm saying no and no for the rest of my life. But I do have to say, through my podcast, Minds on Mushrooms, I've had similar conversation with people who are saying once you do understand your addiction and you understand what you're masking and hiding and running from, you can kind of swap that. It might be something I'm looking into. Like if I go to Italy, I want to enjoy a glass of wine.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? So the response from the microdosing was so strong and this is about 2 years ago. It's still there. Um, I just but again, it was why aren't we all talking about this? How I took a chocolate truffle for a week and I'm not going to drink for the rest of my life. And all of these in turn from not drinking, um, and then experimenting more with the medicine. And that's a whole nother thing, but it was just, that was the start of this whole journey. But I couldn't believe that I was committing to not drinking ever again and feeling great. Like it was no thing. I'm like, hey guys, but I definitely, my thing was, and my parents, because I was open with them. I said, I've decided no more alcohol for me, but I really enjoy psilocybin magic mushrooms. And they were so concerned that, well, you're just swapping the alcohol for the mushrooms. I'm like, kind of, but, and then that's when I started researching more about how we can't be physically addicted to psilocybin and how,
Yeah.
um, so, but again, it's just that there, well, with them, there was such a stigma that I was going to be addicted to this drug. And, um, but yeah, I really found it so magical that the mushrooms told me, I don't need alcohol. I don't need it for the rest of my life. And it made me so curious to understand, like, how is this so powerful? And why aren't we learning about this in kindergarten?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. What a beautiful journey to be at that place you're at in your life. And literally 7 days later, have this massive perspective change in such a short period of time. Yeah. psychedelics do that. I've been to different ceremonies where I've seen people not know what love feels like in their body, and then 12 hours later, they know what love feels like. They remember it.
You,
Their heart opened. I've seen that so many times, which is why I'm in this field, which is why I do this. I've just seen so many things. And yeah, there's no plant medicines that are addictive. They're not addictive. I've, you can get behaviorally addicted to things. Like I was addicted to psilocybin when I was working at a really shitty job where I would have
mm,
it every day. And it was
mm,
my escape from,
mm.
it was like, it was like I was in a little happy bubble walking through hell. That's what it was
Right.
like. So you can get behaviorally addicted. You
Hmm.
can get it. Here's the thing, you can get addicted to escaping
Right. Well, oh yeah.
whatever it is, but the body doesn't get addicted to it. You can have psychological addictions to escaping,
Hmm.
and you could use that, you could project that onto psychedelics if you wanted to. But, the psychedelics will, it's very hard to do that. The
The,
reason why is because
yeah.
they'll tell you the truth. They'll tell you the
Hmm.
truth. Like they'll be like, hey, what are you doing? Especially if it's a plant.
Yeah. They'll let you know if you're abusing, I would say. And then they
Oh, yeah.
don't, I mean, because when I was first starting out, um, so let's say a group of my friends are like, Maggie, let's go to a Twins game tonight without alcohol. I'm sitting there going, well, everybody's going to be drinking. So I would say in my beginning of my journey, I was having psilocybin most days, right?
Yeah.
But they it the they don't work if you're continuously taking. I mean, so it's that whole thing of the tolerance can be built up so quickly.
Yeah.
And then yeah, I feel like, I mean, I know for some people the idea of plant medicine and is out there, but I believe that plants have an intelligence and it's shared with us. And when I take my mushrooms, small and large doses, it's these messages that I'm hearing or feeling or have the sensation of. But yes, I've had the specific feeling where I knew I'm having psilocybin too often, and it's almost like silly me or like I just ate whatever amount and having zero feeling or sensation of being high or intoxicated. And whereas somebody who hasn't had psilocybin in 30 days would take that amount and they'd be off their head, or
Yeah.
maybe having a healing journey.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a very personal relationship I have with my mushrooms, but they tell me the truth. And it's not always something you want to hear, but it's acknowledging the acknowledgement of something, and then you choosing how to react or work or move toward resolving or growing.
Yeah. Yeah. All these plants do is just allow us to feel. That's all
Hmm.
it is. And do you want to avoid the feeling or do you want to feel it?
Right.
That's all they do. It's just like, hey, here's what you're not feeling.
Hmm.
What are you going to do about it? And you're like, I don't want to feel that. It's like, well, okay, but I'll
Yeah,
come back again if
that's a
it's important.
really it's I'm sure I'm so vocal. I have a podcast and constantly talking or hoping to talk about psychedelics and healing. But that is there are so many people that will say, Maggie, why would I ever want to do that? Like, why would I ever want to have a healing journey, or when I can, have 6 drinks but yeah, I think it's that thing, you got to be ready.
Yeah,
So
you have to be ready. It's not for everybody. And sometimes when I say that, there's a part of me that's like, yes, it is. What I mean by that is that might not be part of your journey in this life this time around.
yeah.
Maybe another time. I've had experiences where I've connected to plants. I had an experience a few days ago where I connected to a plant and it was a spider plant.
Mhm.
And I was looking at it, and I don't know if you know how spider plants work, but they make these little babies. They have these little offshoots and they make a mini version of them. It kind of comes off the plant and makes a mini version.
Oh, wow.
And I was like looking at it and I touched the leaf and all of a sudden I was like connected to it. It's very hard to describe, but
Hmm.
I was like, it was like, this is how I make babies. I was like, cool. And the lesson was, it's like, you'll get to do this one day, just as I'll get to be you one day. Do you understand?
Oh,
I was
yeah.
like, oh. And just learning about death and learning about that life is really about is you go on until you can't go on anymore. This is what I see psychedelics and plants in my life is I go on, I live my life, I do my very best, and then every 3 to 6 months I'll go into my feeling dojo, which is
Mm.
what a ceremony is. I'll go into that, I'll learn of it's like I'll get to feel a lot. And then I'll be like, okay, where am I not feeling or where am I kind of where can I recalibrate? Then I'll
Hmm.
go on for as long as I can, and then I'll need help and I get help. But eventually you go on and there's no help anymore. You live your
Hmm.
life alone. Your life is you living your life alone. You'll have people that walk alongside you, but eventually you'll come into this life alone and you'll leave it alone.
Hmm.
And I just learned from this plant that's like you're going to die one day and you're going to turn into dust and you might get cremated or whatever, and then that will go up into the air or go into the soil, and then you'll become me. And
Hmm.
then maybe you'll spend your time as a plant for a while or a mushroom, or maybe you'll kind of whatever, but that's okay. That's life.
Right.
That is life. And you don't need to be afraid of death. Death
I,
is not the end.
yeah, but thanks to plant medicine, correct? Like for me,
Yeah.
when I started experimenting and, safely with larger doses, that was such a theme because I constantly in my drinking days was worried about death. I mean, we have heart failure history on my father's side. I know alcohol is the worst thing basically for your heart. And just this constant kind of flying. I had flying anxiety, just irrational probably. But yeah, the first true mystical experience I had shed so much of that and just feeling at the end of the day, everything is going to be okay because we are all together and the cycles and the way the mycelium network works. And like it just was such a calming thing to me. And there's so many documentaries about terminal cancer patients who are seeking so much relief in their last days, or just the settling feeling and love, being held in love versus scared and alone.
Yeah.
So it's so special.
Yeah, yeah, it's beautiful. What was your first mystical experience like? Like, obviously, you said that was about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, where you started the microdosing. How long after that did you have like a macro dose?
So I think it was, I believe I had been alcohol free for about 6 months. And I had at the same time been learning more and more about journeys. And I decided to treat myself to a larger dose experience. I had 5 grams of penis envy.
Holy shit.
Um, I had had a little MDMA at the beginning of ceremony to calm. They say a small amount allows you to, yeah. I have a lot of anxiety, or had, if you can't tell, but I was pretty, it was a big deal to have that
Oh yeah.
amount. So the
Yeah.
MDMA was there just to help me kind of feel safe, or I don't know. It doesn't matter. Anyway, so the whole thing, it was very special to me. I could go on and on and on. It probably one of the most profound experiences of my life. But what was very special to me. I think I mentioned earlier when I was a very depressed, drunk. I actually was sleeping in my basement most nights, and crying. And like I said, I'm not religious, and I was crying and praying to my grandparents, like, help me, save me. How I'm gonna die. So I was in my journey, I started thinking about my grandfather. And it's a long story, but I never really got to grieve losing my grandfather. My older brother's baby died the day before. I called my grandfather to tell him about the baby passing away. My grandfather died that night. Um, so anyway, in my journey, I was thinking about my grandfather and I was crying because I missed the hell out of him. And it's a sad thing. Anyway, but it was at that point, I felt that my grandfather entered my conscious mind. He was there and he was sending me the messages just as the mushrooms do. And he was saying things like, oh, honey, you're crying, but those are tears of happiness. You're not crying tears of sadness anymore. Look at your life. You don't drink anymore. Look at you're a great mother. You're out of your house. You're living on your own. I was able to figure out separation. Because I was literally this feeling of just, like I said, divorce was not in my vocabulary, but so many things had happened for the positive and and I didn't even realize it. He's telling me. And anyway, and then my maternal grandmother had messages for me and my paternal grandmother. And that was just a tenth
Oh yeah, it's
of
hard to
the journey.
describe it all. It's so hard to
Yeah.
describe it all, but that stands out to you because during your darkest days, you were praying to them because you
Yeah.
obviously had a real deep connection with them. And then you had that experience where they came in and were like, hey, like life's happening for you. It's not happening to you. Like
Hmm.
look at how amazing you are. Look at all the wonderful things you're doing. Look, you're a great mum. And there might have been times where you thought you weren't. And there might have been
Right.
times where you thought you were going to die and you would never stop drinking. And then to
Hmm.
have that experience where you're like, hey, it's actually quite the opposite. Look at what you've done.
Right. And also during that experience, my grandfather told me, Maggie, you are here. But my parents were school teachers. He was a school teacher. He said, you would make a wonderful teacher, and you are here to share your story and help teach people how to feel better and be not a slave to alcohol and rid their depression. And so that's what I've been doing or trying to do ever since. But that was my most profound, all in the same journey about 6 months after I had quit drinking and 6 months after microdosing. So I went from a very profound microdosing, never going to drink again experience to this life changing. I mean, it was the most special thing. I couldn't, I, I'm still reeling from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that it was that big and profound and that healing for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's happened since then in your life?
Well, I've just been on this um, continued journey. I guess I'm still constantly working on myself, but I'm trying to do exactly what my grandfather told me. And that is just through the podcast and my coaching and mentoring. It's just trying to normalize and destigmatize just conversation around psychedelics for mental health and addiction. And it's insane, even though they're kind of the trending at the moment, but there still is such a stigma. It's unreal. So it's really, truly about continuing the conversation, letting people, if they feel comfortable sharing their healing journeys, because I think the more we share and the more we tell our experiences, the more we learn and help to have more accessible education to something that I believe we should all be privy to.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm just on this constant path. Things are exciting. My mind's on mushrooms. Community is growing. And I've started there's a small network of us essentially there to help anybody in any part of their healing journey. I only know what I know.
Yeah.
So I do work with a lot of people, like you had mentioned. The Rethinking Your Drinking program has been a big one. I'm really proud of people like even mention just to come forward and say, it's not about getting rid of alcohol for the rest of your life, but it's about acknowledging, hey, yeah, maybe I do need to rethink.
Yeah.
um, or at least I see people, they tell me I'm taking the time to work with the medicine rather than turn to the beer. And um, that's exactly what the program's all about. And so that's been great. And yeah, like I think you touched earlier, many corporate women who are in that daily grind, killing it. They're doing great. But I think at some time they feel stagnant or they just feel that they could feel more or have more passion towards something. So that's been wonderful, just kind of on the microdosing level, of course. Uh, all such beautiful, profound, I guess, reviews. Like it's just like somebody said the other day, she just said, oh, great. Now I'm not going to remember it. Oh, she said, Maggie, this is enlightenment, not impairment.
Oh, beautiful.
She had just had a microdose and was having some coffee and sitting outside.
That's
And
really cool.
I said, I'm going to use that.
Yeah, it is. It's expansion, not contraction. Alcohol is contraction. It's contraction. It is numbing. Psilocybin is expansion. You feel the way you feel after a drink of alcohol versus after you feel like maybe a microdose where you can feel it. What I learned about microdosing is you don't really you feel slightly different. Like, you shouldn't be seeing colors and stuff like that. It's a bit too much. But that was my microdoses for
Right.
years. I'm like, I don't feel a microdose. It's not the point to be like feel it and be like, oh, see like things swirling.
Right.
I didn't take it unless I felt that. That was my addictive kind of I wanted
Me
to
too.
escape. Yeah.
Me too. It's a very
Um,
fine line, though, too.
oh yeah.
Perfecting your dose is huge. And
Yeah.
I think it's an ongoing, evolving thing.
Yeah.
So, I get a little caught up between microdose and like it's full spectrum and
Yeah.
it's very situational.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
but at the end of the day, microdosing, true, it's sub-perceptual. We're not supposed to be feeling much at all. If anything, you've taken too much, right?
Yeah.
So,
Or a slight change. Maybe I've had people you could speak to it much more. You're much more aware about it than I am, but like people are just like, yeah, just kind of feel lighter, not as heavy.
I like to say I've got a pep in my step and I kind of just feel this hug again, lifted. So I am lighter. I'm not as heavy on I don't know, my feet. But I love microdosing, especially you with the protocols when you take your days off or your day off. I feel like you're rewarded. So you need to kind of like have that reset and maybe on that reset day it's a little bit more introspective and then you're taking notes about some thoughts or and then when you revisit your next dose I guess what I'm trying to say is the more intentional and mindful of it's really a practice, right?
It is, yeah.
um
It's a sacrament. It's precious. It's a ceremony. Yeah. The more you have reverence around something, the more you'll
mhm.
get out of it, whatever it is.
Exactly. So I think that it's beautiful for people at the very baseline level to have this like more connected, more present, more love feeling, and then to see them just through the practice and sticking to the protocol and journaling and meditating. I mean, that's a whole nother end of the practice spectrum. So it's been really really rewarding just to be working with people and seeing small and major transformation.
Beautiful. Where do you want to be? Where do you want this to go for you? And how do you want to feel like 2, 3 years from now?
Well, maybe this is a good time to share a little news. There's nothing, I mean, it is official, but I was asked to be on the board of a psychedelic sanctuary, which is also a nonprofit here in Minnesota. And my that's where I feel my heart is. It's having a community, working with the community, and just continuing to help people heal and grow and expand. But I also, I envision that my day to day. I also hope to continue this podcast. It sounds weird, but I envision some sort of psychedelic show. I don't know. I want
Cool.
to where people are coming on again. It's like sharing their stories. They are so empowered by that, and other people are so empowered to hear these things. And everything in the psychedelic space and mental health space, spiritual space is so intertwined and overlapping. I keep hitting my microphone. There's again just a never ending conversation. So I would like to see myself as a community leader here in Minneapolis, helping people, continuing to help people, and just being a voice for all, continuing to be a voice. And who knows where we'll be in the next couple of years. Um, I think that Minnesota, we are pretty progressive in that we have a Minnesota Psychedelic Task Force that Governor Walz, who is the running mate for Kamala, had put together, who is tasked with research, recommendations for pathway for decriminalization and or a model for legalization. So hopefully Minneapolis and Minnesota is setting a model or a standard for other states to follow. And I think that's the intention of this task force. So again, it's just exciting times now. And in 3 to 5 years, I hope to be doing exactly what I'm still doing, but on a more professional, defined level, and hopefully with decrim in process, or feeling safe,
Yeah.
continuing to doing these things safe in when it comes to legalities. As we know, it's obviously not a legal medicine.
No, no, there's a long way to go, but I think we're working in the right direction and you being a forefront of that through your own experiences. Like I had a saying come to me. It's like you can only leave breadcrumbs for people. You can't tell anybody what to do. This world is full of people that have had beautiful healing experiences for themselves. Then they spend their entire life telling everybody that that's what they need to do.
Mm,
They do it with meat. They do it with the carnivore diet. They do it with being a vegan. They do it with plant medicine, and they sing it from the rooftops, and that's their entire life's message. And there's
mm,
nothing wrong or right about that. It just is not, it's not inclusionary. It can be
right.
very divisive for people. People like the recently saved Christian, like that kind of archetype. I've seen
Yeah.
that so often and it's a natural thing. It's a natural part of maturing is getting to the point where it's just like all I can do and all you can do is leave breadcrumbs for people. And one of the saddest things about life is when people you thought were going to pick up the breadcrumbs don't.
Mm-hmm.
And you really thought they were, and they're not going to come with you. And this life is not a Disney movie, and not everybody makes it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I had this saying come to me. It's like, be the breadcrumb. Live your life as the message. It's all
Right.
you need to do. You don't need to do anything else. You can offer things to people and they'll either pick it up or they won't.
Right.
And the more you have expectations of people, the more you'll
Mm-hmm.
suffer. And it's hard. It is hard, especially if it's your mom or your dad or your sister or your child or your best friend, and they don't pick it up and
Mhm.
they never will. And that's causes a lot of suffering for people, and they have a very hard time because they want the people they love to feel what they feel, which is connectedness to themselves, connectedness to the divine, connectedness to the world. Yeah, it's difficult, and you are being the breadcrumb right now. That's what you're doing. That's your podcast, and that's the tune you're singing, and the right people will hear it.
Right. Yeah. And again, alcohol isn't for everyone, and
Yeah,
either is psilocybin.
yeah,
But I just appreciate, I'm thankful for my experiences, and everything, and even alcohol, because that's what brought me to my healing and my never-ending journey. So, yeah, at the very least, I just hope to provide, education, really, just so people can learn more, and community and integration more
yeah.
accessible. So,
What's something you learnt recently that you're really diving into, you're really excited about at the moment, maybe in the past weeks or months?
ooh, let's see here. You know, probably I really amped up or started getting a lot more serious with my meditation practice.
Mm,
Um, and I think I'm really excited about working myself, with energy. So, moon cycles. So, the whole idea of learning about how we can work with the moon and her cycles and, changes and transformations throughout the month. There's a rebirth, death, and rebirth. I'm really kind of digging deep into that and feeling again, my spiritual practice has, I was basically an atheist before plant medicine. I'm still trying to discover and define what everything means for me spirituality wise, but, I'm really enjoying learning about the moon, and how I can, have faith in the moon that it's going to be there every day, or you know what I'm saying.
yeah,
So that's been fun and interesting. I don't know, plant medicine wise, I have been learning more, and I'm excited. I'm about to embark on a Wachuma ceremony. Um, I've had sat with it previously, but have learned heaps more that I'm excited about, putting into, this second time around. So,
beautiful.
um, yeah, Wachuma and the moon.
That's cool. And any person, I always challenge people. Like I work in the car sales industry, right? So I work
Oh
with
yeah.
like they're very driven men. And
Mm.
if you talk to them about, hey, I'm learning about the moon, they would probably be like, what the fuck are you talking about? I always challenge people like that. And I'd be like, okay, if the moon affects the tides, which we know it does, which are giant bodies of water, is it possible that it affects us? Is it possible? And I'm not saying for you to confirm it. Is it possible? And people are like, yeah, I guess it's possible. I'm like, that's me being polite about it. You know what I mean? It's me being
Right.
polite and being like, hey, like it's like the Dunning-Kruger effect where they think like that you're the idiot because the more educated you are on something and you tell somebody who's not educated on it all, they will belittle you and be like, that's ridiculous. Like you're
Mhm.
insane. Like any
Right.
any great person of any industry, whether it's I think about Elon Musk when he told people he was going to land rockets
Mm.
and people that he looked up to that had gone into space said he was an idiot. Like you're
Right.
stupid. Like that's never going to work. Same with psychedelics. Like the healing that I've seen in people firsthand within myself in a very short period of time, you try to communicate that to people, they're like, it's so outside of their frame of reference that they'll attack you.
Yeah. I
And
think,
that's
but
okay.
that's okay because to be honest, I used to be somebody who, if you were to tell me you're learning more about the moon, I would, because it's part of the program. Even
Yep.
with psychedelics, spirituality, I have to definitely mask what I'm saying depending on who's my audience, right? I mean, not everybody with the stigma. So it's unfortunate, but it is what it is and it's okay. And it's also we're entitled to our opinions as anyone else is. Um, but again, that's what I'm loving about like continued conversations about normalizing things that the darn moon, yeah. Kindergarten. I'm just kidding. Like
Yeah.
just learning about things. Yeah, I don't know. It's just again, more conversation leads to normalization.
Yeah, exactly. Like the more you talk about something, the less weird it is and the less uncomfortable it is.
Hmm.
What is, how do you want your life to be remembered? I'll end it with this question. When you get to the end of your life, how do you want people to feel about how you lived your life? And how do you want to feel about how you lived your life?
Sure. I think I my legacy. I just want to be remembered as someone who was truly only helping people or hoping to help people and working with people um, by, again, sharing my story and experiences and hopefully giving them inspiration to heal and grow and expand for themselves. That's what I hope to be remembered as. And I hope, I want to be unapologetic about it. I want to be okay with waving my freak flag high because I just have so much passion around all of this, and it is a lot, and it's weird, and it's upside down, and delulu. What do we say? I don't know, but I don't want to be afraid. I want to be out there and loud and proud about what's changed my life and made me complete 180 mental health wise. I'm so thankful that I'm not dead or having those dark thoughts and moving forward positively.
Beautiful. Where can people find you to, if they love this episode and they want to learn more about you, where can they find you? Where can they listen to more of you?
Sure. You can hit up my website, which is mindsonmushrooms.com. It's always a work in progress. Please don't judge. But it's actually being updated soon here with my coaching and mentoring offerings.
Beautiful.
Um, and also, yeah, my email is just info@mindsonmushrooms.com. And the podcast can be found. You can look for Minds on Mushrooms on Apple, Spotify, and we're also on YouTube.
Beautiful. Cool.
Mhm.
Awesome. Do you have any final things you want to share at all before we wrap it up? Any thoughts that are
Let's
present right
see
now?
here.
Anything that came up right now? Anything you want to share?
I guess I would just like to share for anyone who has any curiosity, or maybe you're in a place where you're not ready, you're kind of struggling, or you've just felt that change might be needed. Don't be scared to reach out or check out a podcast episode. It's your birthright to heal and feel and not escape and mask. And I am here for everyone. And I encourage you to, take that next step or just look into it because I think I just want to let you know that I'm here for you. That's all I'm saying.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Maggie. I love all of you
Uh,
listening to this. Thank you once again. And go check her out, go follow her, go listen to her podcast. She's got really cool people on her podcast, really interesting authors that are really diving deep into this stuff. It's a must listen. So we'll see you next week and we'll talk to you soon.